Hi everyone, happy Victober to all of you. So I'm here for the next in my top 10 Victorian novels, and that is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. This actually happens to be the first Victorian novel I have a memory of reading. It was when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I saw on my dad's shelf this utterly beautiful edition of Great Expectations. It was forest green and it had gold foil detail on it. And you know, the Great Expectations by Charles Dickens was like gleaming on the bookshelf. And I picked it up and I could not believe how enthralled I was by a grown-up book. And I mean, what a way to start a story. It's so gritty and grotesque. You know, this little child is going through a graveyard. It's a gray, overcast day, and it's in the marshes. And out of the marshes emerges this convict who is just so disheveled looking, and has, you know, handcuffs on his hands, and is just like almost like demonic looking as he comes out of the water. What a way to get people's attention. And you know, he comes up to Pip, Magwitch, the convict, and he comes up to Pip and he says, you know, like, you go to your house and you get me food, and if you don't, I'll kill you. Like, what a way to start it. And I do think by far it's Dickens' most gothic novel. And I think almost a lot of critics could argue that it's his most perfect novel, because just the craft of writing in this is so sophisticated, such a variation from maybe his more stereotypical types of characters that he has, and such a departure from his kind of normal plot. It is a Bildungsroman where it, you know, traces this one character from childhood until adulthood and has, you know, them grow and change and make different mistakes. But it does feel different because it's a lot more succinct. This is, you know, one of his shortest major novels. It's not as short as A Christmas Carol, but I think it doesn't really, A Christmas Carol kind of seems like its own thing. But compared to his other ones like Bleak House or David Copperfield, Dombey and Son, this is by far the shortest, but like I said, the most succinct. It's like he knew so well exactly what he wanted to do with the story. It seems that this story was so carefully planned out, and such a rich cast of characters. So, you know, you have Pip, this little boy, who he doesn't always have the most personality, but I do feel that you still see growth in him. You see him grow, you see him kind of become an arrogant young man and then a humble young man after he makes some mistakes. And then also such interesting characters. His sister Jo, who she says she has brought him up by hand. You know, his parents have died, so she's brought him up. When she says brought him up by hand, she means that she's beaten him, and she uses this cane named Tickler when he's been disobedient. And there are these terrible scenes of adults just pigging out on food, you know, the meat and dessert, and Pip just has to sit there and watch these gross grown-ups just gorging themselves on far more food than they need. And another character that I love in this is Joe Gargery, his sort of father figure that's married to his sister Jo. There are two Joes that are married. And he's just such a sweet man and such a good, upstanding man. And also he kind of sees this side to Pip's sister Jo that Pip isn't able to see, but he kind of gets her. And even though she does have kind of a prickly exterior, people aren't all bad. Just like people aren't all good. So he's a really neat character, I think. And then a little bit later on to the story, Pip is invited to visit a house called Sadie's House by Miss Havisham. And Miss Havisham is one of Dickens' greatest creations in all of his novels. She's amazing. She is this woman who, when she was young, was engaged to a man who she was very in love with. And then the day of the wedding, he jilted her at the altar. And so she now, for decades and decades, ordered that the wedding feast be left and the table all set. That whole room, it's like time has stopped in that room, and the food has, rotted and decayed, and a lot of the stuff in the room is decayed, including Miss Havisham. She's still wearing her wedding gown. She has never changed. Time has stopped for her from that day. She just let it utterly ruin and destroy her. And so now her revenge is going to be in the form of her daughter, who she has raised to just rake men through the coals. So that is just such a fascinating plot line to me, and just such creativity and genius in that. There's no other character that I've read that I'm like, she seems like Miss Havisham. No, Miss Havisham just seems like Miss Havisham. Nobody else feels like that to me. And I also like that this is narrated in first person. I think that can make a lot of times classics seem more accessible. You feel like you're really getting to know the first, the person, the narrator. And it is interesting too, because it does start out taking place in Kent, which is where Dickens grew up. And so maybe it could seem even a little more personal, and that gives it a different flavor than his other novels. Like I said, you get to see the progression of Pip as a character. And then as he grows up, he has a mysterious benefactor who has given him money, and Pip has his own ideas about who it is. And he spends money, and he spends maybe too much money, and makes some bad choices. And of course, along the way, there's going to be such an amazing cast of characters. Just so highly Dickensian, all of these interesting characters that stay with you. And then there is a big twist, a big reveal at the end, and I did not see it coming. And I totally had a change of heart about certain events that I wouldn't have thought I would have had. And so it's really neat and special about Great Expectations that events that happen in the very beginning that you think might not be quite significant to the whole story, he ends up tying everything all together. It's just a very well executed, seamlessly executed novel. So I think if you are in the mood for something a little gothic, a little dark, but it's so gripping, and like I said, very rewarding, and that is why it's one of my favorite of Dickens. And yes, just so very highly enjoyable. So I hope I maybe convinced a couple people to check out Great Expectations, and I will see you guys for another video soon.